Successor to the original Trump Jack type back from the days of Medarot 3, 25 years after its release. This is TJK01 Jack Arcis, with a somewhat new kit of Power Napalm, Beam Vulcan, Break Vulcan, Blight Legs, and the leg ability of Assault, which grants a percentage of the leg's combined resist stats to power when using scatter skills. Now, Jackal, the original Trump Jack type, has definitely made his mark in a lot of very powerful and high-end competitive meta. Definitely as one of the big three defenders of the game, arguably the fastest, yet the squishiest of the three behind Basalt and Virgo. But Jack Arcis basically takes a lot of the perks that held Jackal back, such as, again, his light armor and very low and very strange power output, and kind of turns it back around to make him just a little bit more synergetic and more forwardly aggressive than his predecessor, while still maintaining his original mantra as a rather role-confused sword. Power Napalm on the head is a gunpowder skill that is also a scatter effect, which means it will damage one part normally and then two others randomly for extra damage. However, it's also worth noting that Power Napalm is a little more forwardly aggressive on the grounds that it grants a times 1.5 damage bonus as long as the user's legs remain intact, which is fairly easy to accomplish as long as you can keep Jack Arcis or any user of Power Napalm in this respect fairly well protected and guarded by a shield. Now granted, even with a lot of power skills having lost one of their cooldown penalties a number of patches ago, it is still worth noting to keep this in mind and caution if you are planning to make use of this. And with the base power of almost 2k, it's already going to hit fairly hard when he does officially go fire that off. Beam Vulcan on the right arm is a somewhat new skill being added to the game, and not necessarily new in the sense that it adds any new effects or any new conditions or penalties or any buffs, but rather it's just a beam skill that has a scatter type of effect. So much like Power Napalm, it will damage one part normally and then two others randomly. Very similarly to, say, like Beam Claw as a very great example. Actually, Beam Claw would be a very solid example, a counterpart as a shooting version of as a melee version of this. So same thing, it'll get a double damage bonus at 30% charge and a triple damage bonus at 100% charge, and of course, as a scatter skill, it will consume 3 charges of any guard that is intercepting it. Break Vulcan on the left arm is basically the same thing, but instead with a gravity attribute skill instead of a optic skill. So in this case, it will get a success boost relative to a certain amount of charge threshold, but it also will be very solid in the use for heavy punish. So if the user is if the target is packing more than two or more heavy parts, they are definitely going to be feeling the pain from that. Whereas one or none, probably not as much. Much like it was with Beam Claw with Beam Vulcan, Break Vulcan is more or less just kind of a shooty version of Break Claw, which we've only seen a couple of times so far since release. So it is going to be very nice to see a shooting version of that skill, just in case a shooting-only modifier is necessary. Plus, with it having the heavy punish with the gravity attribute, means it's already going to be off to a very solid foot and fairly easy to use. And honestly, with a base power of 1711 and a very high success of 1701, you're not really going to be having a lot dodge or graze you very easily, if honestly at all. Flight Legs means that Jack Arcis will have fairly solid coverage on most terrains with a very high emphasis on evade and mobility. But compared to most other Flight Legs, which tend to put an extremely high emphasis on evade, such as being in the high 15 or 1600s at the minimum, Jack Arcis tends to trade a little bit of that down for a little bit more armor to kind of make him a little more resistant. That being said, with the base mobility of 1107, he's already off to a very good start in the speed department, as one would expect for a flyer. And an evade of 1251 is also nice, as this means he can dodge or graze fairly consistently, even if it means he is trading a fair chunk of his evade compared to most other high-end Flight Legs. A melee resist of 617 is really not great though, as this does mean that anything that does manage to get in his personal space is really going to be making him hurt. But with a shoot resist of 1402, that definitely does help him out a little bit better, as this means that he will be able to take pot shots and exchange shots with an enemy shooter from afar just a little bit better than Jackal was able to originally, which is definitely one of the really big pro points for him. In the armor department, he's packing about 4339 for the head, about 4200 per arm, and just shy of 4800 for the leg, so he's definitely healthier than Jackal was in a lot of cases as well in the armor department. So, not only can he tank things just a little bit better than Jackal can, but he's also more forwardly aggressive and doesn't necessarily require a charge, much like Jackal does. But adding Assault into this, though, it does mean that a percentage of his resist, which, tying those numbers together briefly, will put him at just shy of about 2100. About 20 to 25% of that will be added as bonus damage when using any of his scatter skills, which, would you look at that, Power Napalm, Beam Vulcan, and Break Vulcan are all scatter type skills, so his already impressive damage will be going up just a little bit higher every time he chooses to use them. Now, much like Jackal though, Jack Arcis also can meta change into a proper blade-like form, this one being a little more short sword-ish kind of appearance based on the description and the appearance, but also a little more forwardly aggressive as well. This time around, he changes his kit out for Leg Killer, Shoot Bash, Fight Bash, Float Legs, and the leg ability of Defense Plus, which grants a heating and cooling bonus passively to any equipped defense skills. Now, in this form, he doesn't trade too much around based on compared to the original Jackal, but he becomes much more diverse and more unconventional, I guess you can call it, as far as defense, as far as a floating sword as a shield is concerned. In this form, Leg Killer is a melee skill that gets a double damage bonus and piercing if it attacks the opponent's legs exclusively. And with the base power of 1936, that's going to be extremely painful when that does come into play. Basically, that is going to be a very heavy emphasis on the metal nature kind of tying in with what it's targeting. So a little caution to that is advised if you plan to use it. Shoot Bash and Fight Bash are defense skills that, when placed on the line, will basically allow Jack Arcis to intercept one incoming charge, or one incoming skill, negate the respective attack at 0 damage, negate any ailments that are applied, and if it manages to catch that particular attack and nullify it, it will punish the attacker by stunning them with a Thunder ailment. So Shoot Bash will basically punish any shooters with a nullification and a stun. Fight Bash will do the same thing with a melee attack with a nullification and stun as well. In this form, he exchanges his kit out mostly and trades a little bit of his speed for better overall coverage with his survivability. Lowering his speed from about 1100 to 952 is really nice, so he still has a pretty solid in the speed department. An evade of 1611 does go up just a little bit though, as he is able to dodge or defend just a little bit better in this form. But his melee resist does go up tremendously, almost more than doubling at 1581. So in this form, he can definitely hold his own up close and personal a whole lot better than he could before. But with a shoot resist going down pretty notably to 986, you are going to want to exercise a little bit of caution for any enemy shooters that try to take advantage of this. And Defense Plus is really nice too, as it will passively boost the heating and cooling of Shoot Bash and Fight Bash. And given that both have low 700s for their cooldown and almost 900 for their heating, he's going to be going pretty fast when he's going to be firing both of these. All this being said though, as a pure set score, and I did not put it here, I do have to rate Jack Arcis a pretty middle of the road 6.5 out of 10. Well, while he does the job as a more forwardly aggressive version of Jackal a whole lot better than Jackal did, he is still with a couple of particular concerns. He is more aggressive in base mode and doesn't require as much charge or lead up than Jackal does, which does work to his advantage. But in trade though, while Shoot Bash and Fight Bash are both extremely potent on paper, the problem is both of them only have one charge upon use. So that means that once it's intercepted, you do have to go back and reset it again, which leaves you wide open unless you have another defender on the team, which kind of calls into question how you plan to use it. But to Jackal's advantage, he does have very high heating and cooling while using Shoot and Fight Bash, thanks to Defense Plus being added on. As mixed parts, I do have to rate him just a little bit higher at a 7 out of 10 in this case. primarily on the grounds that even if you aren't missing out on too much with Leg Killer, Shoot Bash, and Fight Bash, having Power Napalm, Beam Vulcan, and Break Vulcan, and a fairly solid chunk of Flight Legs with Assault on there will be really nice to use. And you could even mix those up across a number of other scatter type skills you could use based on how you want to personalize the performance. So if you don't really care to use Jack Arcis as a defender type, you can always use him as a scatter type DPS just as efficiently.